All right, let's move further afield. Then President Emmanuel Macron has today visited Kyiv in Ukraine. The EU member countries are continuing to demonstrate their support for Ukraine that has been invaded by Russia. The war in Ukraine has led to many Ukrainians killed and thousands have fled the country. Let's get the latest for you. Then we cross live to Kyiv in Ukraine to our correspondent Sergio Olmos. Good day to you, Sergio. All right, we of course getting the news that President Macron and other leaders are in Ukraine. Let's talk about what messages they're bringing to Ukraine. But on the back of that, is Ukraine and specifically the Ukrainian president not tired of these words of support? At the end of the day, what Ukraine really does want is to be part of NATO. And of course, then the alliance would be obligated to defend and help Ukraine in its war with Russia. Is Ukraine not tired of these words of support?
Well, I think in the 3 months that this war has unfolded, Ukraine has been specific about its messaging. Of course, early on it asked to close the skies, and of course there's been frustrations with some of the support from European allies, specifically Emmanuel Macron of France. But what we've been hearing from Ukrainian officials over and over again the last few weeks is a pretty clear message. They're asking for heavy weapons, almost across the board here in Kyiv, the capital, and in Donbass, where I reported from. They've been asking for these heavy weapons to push back the Russian invasion in the east. It's right now in Severodonetsk, where the fighting is the fiercest. With the visit of Emmanuel Macron and these other European leaders, they're showing solidarity with Ukraine. They visited Irpin, which was devastated by under Russian occupation, signs of mass executions and torture of civilians there. And they were saying the right words, that they want to support Ukraine and they want to send more weapons to Ukraine, balancing that out with wanting to keep dialogue with Vladimir Putin of Russia. But here in Ukraine, I think the tone of the room, if you will, is that they're not asking for things they know they're not going to get, like joining NATO. They do want to be part of the EU, and of course yesterday we saw some other countries show their solidarity and support for Ukraine joining the EU. But they've really been on message about asking for these heavier weapons. It's almost like they've stopped trying for something they know they're not going to get, joining NATO, and they're really pushing for things they think they can get, like these heavy weapons.
Yeah, and let's talk about whether or not they're able to share any sort of information as to what the EU is doing at the moment in finding a solution to this war. Of course, we keep hearing about sanctions, and just recently the Ukrainian president did ask for harder sanctions to be imposed on Russia, and one wonders if that is actually working.
Right. At the moment, it doesn't look like those sanctions that have been imposed have had the effect that I think Ukraine has been wanting. At the moment, Russia's economy has contracted, and it has, it's undergoing troubles of its own. But the war in Ukraine has not let up. While Russia has been pushed out of the Kyiv region, Chernihiv, and pushed out of artillery range in Kharkiv, they're winning the war at the moment, if you will, in the Donbass. They are gaining ground. They have pushed Ukrainian forces nearly out of Severodonetsk, and they're doing that with an overwhelming amount of forces on the ground and artillery, as well as air superiority. They just have bigger guns than Ukraine has and more ammunition to spend. Ukraine, is not seeing the effect of sanctions right now on the battlefield. This may come as the months go on and as we get into wintertime, but at the moment, the sanctions have not had the effect of stopping or even restricting Russia's ability to move in Ukraine. I should also be clear, at every step of the way that European leaders have shown their support for sanctions, Ukrainian officials have not laughed that off, or they've been grateful and showing signs of of acknowledging that. But certainly, what Ukraine is asking for is much more than what President Emmanuel Macron is willing at this point, I think, to give.
Right. Thanks very much for that update. No doubt we'll be touching base with you as this certainly does go on. That is our correspondent live from Kyiv in Ukraine, Sergio Olmos. We're going to take a short break. More news coming up after this. Do stay with us.